Picture this for a second. You have something important coming up, a performance, a rehearsal, a deadline, and in your imagination, the conditions for preparing for it are perfect. Quiet space, plenty of time, your normal routine, your normal tools, your normal amount of sleep. Now, throw all of that out. And this is where I'm recording this episode from. I'm on the fourth of 5 back-to-back trips this summer. I just landed in Germany to see family after more than 24 hours of travel, and I'm running on the kind of jet lag where you're not totally sure what day it is. And in the last few weeks, I've prepped repertoire in a tiny condo in Mexico, in a San Antonio hotel room where, if I'm honest, I didn't get nearly as much done as I wanted to. And now in my brother's basement playroom, surrounded by toys and the loose balls that have escaped from his kid's ball pit. So that's the actual physical location of my preparation right now, a ball pit. And next week, I'm singing in front of real people at a Spanish diction course and 2 concerts of Spanish music in Madrid. So today's episode is about what it actually looks like to prepare for something that matters when the circumstances are nowhere near close to the ideal. Because I think a lot of us are waiting for the ideal conditions before we let ourselves feel prepared. And that mindset can cost us.
Welcome to Your Passaggi Professor, a podcast for singers who want tools to bridge the gap between the hard skills we learn in music school and the soft skills we need to live focused, intentional lives. I'm your host, Sarah Neely, voice professor, director, and certified life coach. Each week, we'll talk about mindset, emotional regulation, boundaries, and more so you can navigate the passaggi of your life, both on and off the stage.
If you've been listening to this season of the podcast, you know I've been coming back again and again to this idea of the pastiche career, the patchwork nature of a singer's professional life. Different cities, different projects, different roles, all stitched together into something that doesn't look linear, but adds up to a life. And this summer is a very literal, very physical example of that. My preparation has been just as patchwork as my actual career. A condo, a hotel room, a basement playroom, an airplane. None of these are the practice room I would choose, and I think that's kind of the point. I really love that mindset that you can't just practice until you get it right. You need to practice till you can't get it wrong, which is great, and I definitely aim for that most of the time. Except that sometimes, despite your best efforts, the circumstances don't allow for that. But if you focus on not being able to get to that point, you will set yourself up for extra nerves and more likelihood to make mistakes. But if I only knew how to prepare in ideal conditions, I would be in trouble constantly. Because this career, and if we're being honest, life in general, doesn't offer ideal conditions very often. What it offers is a string of imperfect situations that you have to learn to work inside of. And the skill isn't eliminating imperfection or eliminating hard things. The skill is learning how to do good work anyway. And I want to be honest about the less flattering part of this too, because I think it's the part that is actually useful to you. When I don't feel prepared, my default is to blame myself. The thought shows up almost automatically. I'm not good enough. I'm not focused enough. I should have done more. And here's the tricky part. Sometimes that thought isn't even wrong. Maybe I could have used that time in San Antonio better. Maybe there is more I could have done. But here's what I've learned to ask myself. Even if that thought is true, does it serve me? And the answer is often no. Self-blame doesn't make me more prepared. It doesn't get the text more memorized or help my body stay balanced to sing freely. All it does is add a layer of anxiety on top of an already imperfect situation. It takes something that's already hard and makes it harder. So the thought I'm actively practicing is this. I will prepare better, I will sing better when I believe, genuinely, that I'm doing my best under these less than perfect conditions. Not my best in some abstract ideal world, my best right here in the ball pit basement on 4 hours of broken airplane sleep and jet lag. And that's not me letting myself off the hook. It's me refusing to let self-blame be the thing that runs the show. So let's get a little concrete, because I know some of you are in your own versions of this right now, and I want to give you real tools, not just an abstract feeling to aspire to. A lot of what I've been doing this summer is memorization work without ever making a sound. No practice room, no piano, no singing, sometimes not even a quiet room, just the text. Here's what that actually looks like. I've been listening to recordings and mouthing the text along with them just to keep my articulators moving and getting them up to speed, even when I'm not using my full voice. Your tongue, your lips, your jaw need repetition, just like the rest of the instrument does, and this is a way to train that without needing to actually phonate. Conducting and speaking the rhythm. This one is enormously useful and often skipped. I'll conduct through a piece while speaking the text and rhythm, sometimes not even out loud. But this is really important for two reasons. It reinforces the rhythmic structure independent of the notes, and it's a real test of whether you've actually memorized the transitions or the rests between phrases and not just the phrases themselves. And those seams, the moment one phrase ends until the next one starts, are often where memory slips actually show up. So if you can speak your way cleanly through those seams, you're building something that will hold up. And building a subtext thought or something in those in-between moments is also really important. Score study for oral cues, even without an instrument. I've been going through the score and noticing where the harmony changes and where the chords shift under certain words. Where does the harmonic color change right before a phrase that I always seem to forget? And noticing those places creates aural landmarks as well. So you start to expect a change at a certain point in the text, and that expectation becomes another thread holding your memorization together. Another really important thing that I practice is drilling the text out of order. And this is so important. Maybe even the most important, because when you always practice a piece from beginning straight through to the end, you start to rely on that momentum. Phrase 2 comes right after phrase 1, but that's just a sequence. It feels like memorization until the moment something interrupts the sequence. Something distracts you or you simply blank, and then suddenly you have no idea where you are in the piece because you were never actually recalling text, you were writing a chain reaction. So I've been very deliberately drilling phrases out of order with random starting points. I always drill first words of phrases cold with no lead in, and it's much harder and it takes a lot longer and can feel frustrating when you can't recall it quickly, but it starts to build and gain momentum. And it's also one of the ways that I know how to find out whether something is actually memorized versus if it just feels memorized because of the momentum. This helps me build confidence that even if I do have a memory slip, I know that I can course correct and get back in and get back on track. So I'm going to walk you through a real example of this because I've been working on a piece that has genuinely humbled my memorization this summer. I'm working on the Carceleras from Chapí's Zarzuela, Las Hijas del Tebedeo. I gotta practice my Spanish diction and not my Mexican Spanish diction. It's really tricky, actually. Anyway, this is an aria that's fast and it's text dense, and the middle verses are structured in a way that is really easy to mess up. So each of the 4 middle verses have a 3-part phrase. So the whole phrase is stated, then you state the middle and end phrase, and then repeat the full phrase again. And then the second and fourth verses have a tiny little coda of the third phrase again at the end. So the first phrase or the first verse of that middle section is beginning, a mi novio yo le quiero, middle, porque roba corazones, and con su gracia y su salero, salero, salero. And then it goes middle, porque roba corazones, end con tu gracia y su salero, and then all three. A mi novio yo le quiero, porque roba corazones con su gracia y su salero. When I start drilling this out of order, I test myself on first words. A mí, porque, con tu. Porque, con tu. A mí, porque, con tu. But here's where it gets kind of funky, because I realize that the second verse, which follows the same structure, has the same first word for the middle phrase. It starts with porque also. And then I started mixing those two up all the time and then would end up throwing myself all kinds out of whack. And so I realized that I needed to build a more specific landmark in my brain for those two middle phrases. So the first verse is porque roba corazones. And then in the second verse, the middle phrase is porque hay muchas que lo quieren. And so I had to really make that clear mark between both starting porque, but first verse porque roba, and third verse porque hay muchas. Roba muchas. Roba muchas. And then on top of that, I built in some more specific imagery because just the words don't always stick. So for the first verse, it's about, I love my boyfriend so much, and he steals hearts with his charm. So I am imagining him kind of smoldering, very Flynn Rider from Tangled, and girls laughing. But for the second verse, the text shifts to él me tiene muy ufana porque hay muchas que le quieren y se quedan con las ganas, which is like he's very conceited and so many girls want him, but they're left wanting. And so then I'm imagining very clearly that context of the girls kind of like following after him, but being left behind, all sad and upset. And so there's the two verses, same structure, but same danger of like collapsing into each other and getting all mixed up, especially because it happens really fast. And so I have built the anchor points, I've built the different images, and it's so much deeper of a memorization than just repetition. So you have to build something specific enough that your brain has no choice but to tell the difference. And even then, sometimes I imagine things in an even more wild and crazy fashion. Like imagining him stealing the heart, and it's like a big, glowing, pulsing heart. And then when he leaves the girls wanting, the heart tears and rips and falls to the ground. And it's super visceral. The more wild it is, the more memorable. And that helps as well. So one more practical piece of preparation advice that has nothing to do with memorization or practice. But when you're moving through a bunch of trips, preparation isn't only mental, it's also logistical. So I always make sure that I have the things that I can't live without in my carry-on and not in my checked baggage. So in this case, when I flew overseas, I made sure that I had my gown, my heels, my jewelry, and my iPad with my sheet music in my carry-on and not in my checked luggage, as well as my like charger and adapters and things like that that needed to be in Europe. I always make sure there's no risk of those things. Like I can buy extra clothes, a t-shirt if my luggage gets lost, but buying a gown and buying my heels to be able to perform would be a much bigger expense. So I always make sure I have that in my carry-on. So, sometimes you have to control what you can control. Sometimes that's a mindset. Sometimes it's just where you put your shoes. And, I don't know. If you know me, you know that I'm the princess and the pea when it comes to shoes. I have super high arches, and I finally found a pair of heels that actually has arch support. And I'm so excited, and I am not going to let those out of my sight whatsoever. So, any hoozle, here's where it all comes together. Because next week, I walk into rehearsal in Madrid in an unair-conditioned space in the middle of a heat wave, having never rehearsed this music with piano before. And I already know realistically that I'm going to mix up some of those middle verses. But here's what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to tell myself I didn't memorize well enough or that I'm not good enough. I know that thought's going to pop up, but I know that I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm going to recognize that it's not serving me. And honestly, at this point, it isn't even truly accurate because I've really done a lot of work to memorize. So here's what I'm going to practice instead. When I start to feel myself fumble, I am going to check in with my body and remind it to stay released. I'm going to practice my physical breaths. I inhale, sip in to top off, and then blow out slowly as if through a straw. I'm going to manually release my tongue if I have to. I brought some gauze. I'm going to move. I'm going to keep energy moving through my body instead of letting it lock down in a moment of panic. I am going to actively practice giving myself grace. I'm going to remind myself of the actual conditions of heat and jet lag and no piano rehearsal and 5 trips in the summer without any downtime in between. And I'm going to practice the belief that mistakes in rehearsal are not evidence that something has gone wrong. They're information. Every place I mix up in rehearsal this week is a place that I get to build stronger and more specific, the same way I did already with Porque Roba and Porque Hay Muchas. Rehearsal is exactly where that repair work is supposed to happen. If I only ever encountered the tricky spots on stage, I'd have no chance to fix them. So that reframe, I'm glad I'm making these mistakes now because it's going to make my memorization stronger in the end, is a whole episode in one sentence. So wherever you're preparing for something this week, in your own version of a basement playroom, here's what I want you to take. Notice the self-blame thought when it shows up, or whatever it is for you, and ask yourself honestly, if it's even true, does it serve me? Usually the answer is no. So build a tool that helps you work without the ideal condition. Mark and mouth the text. Speak in rhythm. Conduct and speak in rhythm. Study the score for harmonic landmarks. Drill out of order so that you're testing real recall and not momentum. When 2 things in your material keep blurring together, don't just repeat them. Build a specific anchor, a word, an image, something your brain can't confuse. And expect to make mistakes. Plan for them. Plan for the healthier thought that's going to serve you after the mistake. Because the version of you that expects to stumble and has a plan for what to do next is always going to outperform the version of you that's just hoping nothing goes wrong, or that beats yourself up when something does go wrong. I'll be doing exactly that next week in Madrid, in the heat, hopefully getting Roba and Muchas in their own correct place, and I'll let you know how it goes. But before I go, I want to hear from you. I've given you my toolkit for preparing on the road and under pressure, but I know I'm not the only one who's had to get creative. So what am I forgetting? What do you do to stay prepared when the circumstances are less than ideal? Send me a message on Instagram. I genuinely would love to know, and I might even feature some of your answers in a future episode. So take care of yourselves. I'll see you next week.
Thank you so much for listening to Your Passaggi Professor with Sarah Neely. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen. This really helps the podcast reach more singers just like you. And if you're ready to learn the life skills that smooth the passaggi of your life, you can follow me on Instagram at Sarah Singer's Mindset. There's a link in my bio where you can subscribe to my weekly newsletter and learn more about working with me. See you next time.